Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining our second informational webinar for the Inflation Reduction Act Climate Ready Workforce for Coastal States, Tribes, Territories, and Territories competition. This is, we'll cover the same material as the one held last week, but we wanted to give folks two opportunities for it. Today, we will uh, follow roughly this agenda. We'll talk briefly about NOAA and Sea Grant and the relationship running this, the Inflation Reduction Act legislation, the goals for the Climate Ready Workforce competition, important dates for this competition. You'll actually see those dates multiple times, and then a breakdown for the key elements of the application. I am Joshua Brown, the Environmental Literacy and Workforce Development Lead for the National Sea Grant College Program, which sits within the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which has its vision, resilient ecosystems, communities, economies, and healthy ecosystems, communities, and economies that are resilient in the face of change, and a mission of science, service, and stewardship, all of which lead to this effort to build a climate-ready nation and a climate-ready workforce being pretty central to our long-term goals. This opportunity for climate-ready workforce is a partnership among multiple parts of NOAA, as well as states, institutions, industry, and communities. The three parts that have roles of NOAA that have formal roles in this partnership are the National Sea Grant Office, which is in charge of processing and managing the competition and grants. The Climate Program Office, which is supporting climate resilience technical assistance, updating and maintaining our knowledge sharing platform, and also reporting and monitoring. And then we are supported by the Office for Coastal Management, which has the lead on a range of training services in support of recipients of these awards. The Inflation Reduction Act is a unprecedented investment in America with three key goals. The first, and the one that the Climate Ready Workforce competition addresses, is to help the nation confront the existential threat of the climate crisis. Other aspects of this law will help lower consumer costs and drive the global clean energy economy forward. This competition also is addressing the Biden administration's Justice 40 initiative, which intends to have 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities, those that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened by pollution. Investment categories include climate change, clean energy and energy efficiency, transit, affordable and sustainable housing, training and workforce development, remediation and reduction of legacy pollution, and the development of critical clean water and wastewater infrastructure. This opportunity sits at the nexus of climate change and workforce development. And at that nexus, it has a very simple goal. Not an easy goal, but a simple one. And that is to recruit, train, and place workers in good jobs that enhance climate resilience. And each of those words in that goal are important to successful project applications. The first part is the element of good jobs This is modeled on EDA's Good Jobs Challenge, the Economic Development Administration's Good Jobs Challenge, and relies on a set of principles that were developed by Department of Commerce and Department of Labor. But the goal is to have industry-led, worker-centered training partnerships and systems across the country. That's for the Good Jobs Challenge and for us. And here's their cool logo. You can find out more. The PDF of the slides will have active links, but you can go to EDA's website to learn more about what they have done and continue to do in this space. For this competition, the first set of, this is the first of 3 times you'll see these dates. We really want you to know about them. We've already had a series of webinars. Today you are on the informational webinar number 2. There will be a webinar tomorrow talking about leveraging partnerships to be successful in this competition. Last week we had this same informational webinar and an excellent webinar on the definition of resilience for this competition. The slides for both of those webinars are already up, and links to the recordings of and Q&A are going up on our website shortly. Upcoming, we have on August 2nd a tips for new applicants webinar. This is especially intended for those who are unfamiliar with the process of applying for federal grants. And then we're going to take a bit of a hiatus from general webinars to let you all focus on developing your partnerships with an anticipation of letters of intent due November 30th. These are intended to allow us to gauge interest and identify potential reviewers. If you submit a letter of intent, you are eligible to submit a full proposal. Those letters of intent will come to this email address, sg.grants@noaa.gov. And you will be notified that your submission was received. We're not going to conduct any detailed review or provide feedback. Again, these are to help us gauge demand and develop our reviewer pool. On February 13th, on or before, you need to submit full proposals through grants.gov. Those applications, we'll discuss what needs to be included in those later in this webinar. Okay, so we talked about how this is based on the Good Jobs Challenge, and good jobs are based on a set of principles. These include recruitment and hiring that is actively seeking qualified applicants from all communities, including and especially those from underserved communities. The applicants are being free of discrimination, unequal treatment, or selection or application of selection factors. Applicants are evaluated with relevant skill-based requirements, and unnecessary educational, credential, or experiential requirements are minimized. Similarly, good jobs provide benefits that are sufficient for both full and part-time workers to sustain families, to promote economic security and mobility. And also workers are empowered and encouraged to use these benefits. That principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility are honored. All workers have equal opportunities. They're respected, empowered, and treated fairly. That in the workplace, those principles are a core value and are well practiced. We remove systemic barriers to participation from underserved communities and individuals. We also have worker empowerment and representation such that they can form and join unions. They can engage in protected, concerted activity without fear of retaliation, and that they contribute to decisions about their work, how it is performed, and organizational direction. Similarly, we want workers to have job security and safe working conditions. They are safe, healthy, and accessible workplaces. They are able to know their job's going to be there tomorrow without arbitrary or discriminatory discipline or dismissal. They have adequate hours and predictable schedules and so forth. That good jobs have an organizational culture where all workers belong, are valued, and contribute meaningfully to the organization, where they are paid a stable and predictable living wage before overtime, tips, and commissions. The pay is fair, transparent, and equitable. And then finally, good jobs workers have skills and career advancement opportunities that are equitable and allow them to progress to future good jobs within their organization or elsewhere. They have transparent promotion or advancement opportunities, and they have access to quality employer or labor management provided training and education. So that's the first piece. This is what good jobs mean. And as we said, the EDA Good Jobs Challenge covered this. What makes this competition unique from theirs is that we are not just looking for any good jobs, we're looking for good jobs that enhance climate resilience. And that is a broad idea. What makes a job enhance climate resilience? And we, for purposes of this competition, are looking for jobs that put workers in roles that perform one or more of the following climate-informed skills. They apply equity-centered climate resilience principles. They reduce exposure, vulnerability, and risk to climate-related impacts. They design, build, operate, maintain, and/or improve the infrastructure and systems, including nature-based systems, needed to reduce climate-related vulnerability and/or risk to people, assets, services, resources, ecosystems, or other attributes valued by individuals, businesses, communities, and/or governments. Okay, so those are the three we identified, and we include a fourth category of skills here, which are other relevant skills that you as an applicant may include and justify as climate-informed skills. So in your proposal, you can expand because we are not all-knowing when it comes to these sorts of things. So the pairing is good jobs based on those principles that address, that have workers performing roles with one or more of these skills. For purposes of this competition, skills that solely lead to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, i.e. those that mitigate climate change as their primary focus, for example, building renewable energy infrastructure for the sake of building renewable energy infrastructure, are not included under good jobs that enhance climate resilience. However, where greenhouse gas reductions are co-benefits of resilience efforts, such projects are a good fit. So what makes a good project? Well, they start with eligible organizations, and we'll talk about the eligibility criteria shortly. But eligible organizations that want to apply form partnerships with employers. They work together to identify climate resilient jobs that employers need filled. Those applicants continue to partner with employers and appropriate climate service practitioners to determine the skills needed for those jobs. So this gets to that employer-led, worker-centered aspects of this effort. The full team works together to develop trainings that meet the needs of employers. The training is implemented, leading to placement of workers in employer-committed jobs. And then there is recruitment of diverse training participants and the provision of appropriate wraparound services to support those recipients going forward during their training. And so that leads to a model where we have basically two parts, two stages of a project, and you may choose to apply for one or both stages in a single application, so you can ask for funding for both. The first part is program design, where you are asking for funding to develop the skills training curriculum and materials, and then to secure the technical expertise to train workers. And then the second part is the implementation of that training. This is where you are funding the actual workforce training, including appropriate wraparound services. And again, you may choose to ask to fund either program design, program implementation, or both. Included in program design is things like employers identifying roles to focus on for their hiring needs, determine the skills needed for those roles, developing training model and curriculum, an analysis to determine the existing training providers or courses that could be scaled to address those needs, secure employer commitments to hire. So even if you are just in the program design phase, we are still looking for you to secure employer commitments to hire folks that come out of the training model. And then develop a plan to partner with community-based organizations or workforce service organizations to conduct outreach and recruit underserved workers to participate in the program. That would be the program design phase. The second phase is program implementation, which is exactly what it sounds like. This is where you recruit folks to participate in your program, deliver training, provide those necessary wraparound services, and place folks into those well-paying, good jobs that your employer partners committed to. So an example of what a partnership might look like is the backbone of it is that eligible applicant could be any range of organizations. And you would have a set of partners that include employers, whether they're large businesses, public sector, small business, or other groups. And then you have, and those are the folks who, at the end of the day, are hiring your trained workers. You would also have partners that provide strategic support, whether that's key knowledge, business acumen, training expertise, or service provision. All of these groups might be necessary for you to develop a successful project. As an example, we deeply generic, and you may have different bubbles for each, but essentially you have the applicant organization, the strategic partners that help you provide the services and training needed, and then the employer partners who are hiring the workers at the end of the day. Pardon me. This competition has a lot of priorities that must be addressed. I will go through them and encourage you to think broadly and connectedly about what they mean for your ability to apply and train workers. So the highest level we are going to fund projects that are consistent with our focus to enhance climate resilience, make equity central, and support economic growth. We also are looking for projects that will support one or more of the following actions from the Ocean Climate Plan: promote community resilience strategies, support transformational resilience investments, advance evaluation and adoption of nature-based solutions, reduce climate threats, and improve the resiliency of climate vulnerable protected species. We'll talk about this a little more in the eligibility space, but anyone in a coastal state, tribe, or territory is eligible to apply. And so as you think about these actions, these actions from the Climate Action Plan, if you're in a coastal state, you have an impact either directly or indirectly on all of these, and so should be able to find a way to connect these. Next set of continuing, it's not even a next set, it's next page. Continuing our must-haves, you must recruit workers into good jobs that enhance climate resilience, and train them on those climate informed skills. And I just found a typo. We have 4, not 5. At the end of the day, if you're not recruiting workers into good jobs that enhance climate resilience, you're not meeting the goal here. These workers need to be placed in good jobs within the geographies relevant for this competition, with a focus on training workers from the community where the jobs are located. So if you are training for jobs in big town USA, hopefully you are also recruiting workers from big town USA. We want to support work in communities with climate justice vulnerabilities and in disadvantaged communities overall, as identified by the administration's Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. We want you to identify and include relevant climate experts as strategic partners on the project to inform definition and skill development as you go forward. We ask that you utilize NOAA and or its partners' scientific data access tools, data visualizations, expertise, and or other physical and intellectual assets to help you document climate stressors and inform training design for skills, so that you make sure the skills are meeting the climate resilience need. You need to include wraparound services to support training participants in completing the training. You need to work collaboratively to grow regional workforces and their associated economies by co-developing new or enhancing existing training programs. And you need to build enduring capacity for a workforce that can enhance climate resilience. You also need to carry out either program design or program implementation. We talked about those. And finally, you need to produce tangible metrics, such as employer commitments to hire, job placements, worker advancement in their career paths, and wage gain. Metrics should also be proposed to track progress toward climate resilience, as well as economic and equity goals. Okay, so those are the must-haves. There's a lot of them, and we certainly will at the end take questions, or you can reach out via email to clarify any of those as needed. In addition to all those must-haves, there are several really nice to haves, really good to have. We strongly encourage partnerships to recruit those with barriers to the labor market. For example, persons with disabilities, disconnected youth, individuals in recovery, individuals with past criminal records, trainees participating in public benefits programs, and veterans and military spouses. We also strongly encourage partnerships with historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges and universities, other minority serving institutions, community colleges, and technical colleges. So now we've told you what you must have and what would be really good to have. Probably want to know how this is actually going to work. Right now we have $50 million. With that $50 million, we anticipate funding 10 to 20 awards. These will be cooperative agreements as opposed to more independent grants. We will work closely with you as the projects go forward to help connect you with the necessary resources, support you towards success, and so forth. We expect projects will start August 1st of 2024. They will have a 24 to 48 month duration, and priority will be given to projects that can start placing workers within 12 to 24 months. To be eligible, you need to be both in a certain geography and be a certain type of entity. So first, you must be located in coastal states or territories as defined by the Coastal Zone Management Act or in the District of Columbia. This includes the Great Lakes states. It also includes tribes whose sovereign territory falls within those geographic boundaries. If you are unsure as to whether or not you are eligible, again, please reach out to us. But that's the geography that was set for us by Congress. We also have set for us the type of organizations that are eligible to apply. These include state, tribal, territorial, and local governments, institutions of higher education, and nonprofit organizations or associations. What will the process be for your applications? This will be competitive. These are not block grants or anything like that. Your applications will be selected for funding based on how they rank in regards to the evaluation criteria. They will be ranked or scored by anonymous expert review. The reviewers will remain anonymous to applicants. Reviewers are experts in climate resilience, project management, and workforce development. They're going to be drawn from academia, government, industry, and other sectors that are actively working in this space. The idea is that they are peers. They are folks who are going to know the ins and outs of this kind of work and will contribute meaningful feedback. In addition, they receive bias training prior to their reviews to ensure that as much as possible they are aware of and minimize both conscious and unconscious bias. In order for this competition to work, first we need letters of intent that are emailed by November 30th to allow us to select those experts to make sure that we are getting the right expertise to evaluate, and also that while we are getting your peers, we are not getting people, we're not getting you, we're not getting your best friend, and so we're making sure that our reviewers are free of conflict of interest. And then you'll submit those full proposals through grants.gov. That is the federal government's grant portal. Some organizations use third-party systems to help with the submission. That's fine. That's up to you and your organization. However, issues with those systems do not impact submission deadlines. If you're using a third-party system and it crashes the day the applications are due and you are unable to submit, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that. If there are issues with grants.gov, then we do work to mitigate the consequences of those actions. Applications that do not meet administrative parameters will not be further reviewed. If you don't have the right parts of the application, we cannot carry out a fair review, and so we will not review them past that administrative stage. A key part of many federal grant competitions is cost sharing. For this competition, formal cost sharing, also known as match, is not required. However, other people's money will make projects more competitive. How other people choose to invest and support the work can make a big difference. This doesn't necessarily mean actual cash. It could be employer time commitments to participate in the trainings, could include staff time from strategic partners, could include volunteer hours if relevant. So you don't have to have formal cost sharing, but do look at how you can bring other resources to bear to make your projects more competitive. Once again, just a reminder of all those dates. We've talked about the webinars. The key dates for you to remember are November 30th for letters of intent and February 13th for the applications. These will also be posted on our website and everywhere else we can spam them, but those are the key dates. If your letter of intent comes in on December 1st, I can't accept it. If your application comes in on February 14th, I can't accept it. Please keep those dates in mind and work to meet them. Okay, we are going to talk about the parts of your application. And then we'll wrap up with Q&A. So first, your letter, the key parts. I'm drumming on this because it is essential for us to receive the appropriate amounts. So again, a brief summary of the proposed project is the letter of intent. Allows us to gauge interest and assemble our reviewers. Then your full proposal will give us all the details of the project that those reviewers are going to assess for merit against the evaluation criteria we'll discuss shortly. You've got, again, we must receive them for you to submit a full proposal. They will not be formally reviewed and commented on. They must be emailed to sg.grants@noaa.gov. They don't get submitted through grants. They don't get submitted through grants.gov. They don't get emailed to my personal email. They need to go here. The content, starts out pretty simple. The intention is that this is a lean document. You don't need to spend a ton of time on it. It is your working title. Name, position, affiliation, and contact information of the lead applicant. Name, position, affiliation, and contact information of your climate services practitioner. The number of phases, 1 or 2, to be completed within the scope of the project. How much money you're going to ask for, and a brief discussion of the partnership, its approach, and its impact, including the region and community in which the work will take place. We ask you use FIPS codes to allow us to pinpoint those, And we also ask you to use the CGEST tool to identify the needs within those communities. Talk about the sectors that are going to be supported. Address how this proposal will transform workforce capacity. And then on the third page, give us a table of planned or potential partners. This lets us make sure you've got the strategic partners and employer partners needed to be successful, and also so that we're not recruiting reviewers from your partner organizations. The full proposal will be submitted through grants.gov. Here's a screenshot of the opportunity page. When you are ready to apply, if you're applying directly through grants.gov, you'd hit the red button and it will step you through things. You have 15 pages for your project narrative. In that, you need to describe it, the overall project, your partnership structure and appropriate commitments, the description of your region, the impacts of the potential impacts of the partnership, your funding request and program design and implementation, and how you plan to share results and knowledge coming out of it. Not counting against your 15 pages are your professional qualifications, those of your organizational leads. Any required supporting documents that are relevant in the notice of funding opportunity. There are certifications associated with being a nonprofit, such as your charter. You need to include those. And then any optional supporting documentation that your partnership might find necessary. For instance, a memorandum of understanding between organizations. Again, those 4 bullets there don't count against your 15-page limit. You also need to submit a budget narrative that's going to include a Sea Grant 90-4 form, which can be found on our website, a budget justification explaining why you need the resources you're requesting for and the amounts. This can be things like salary on a per month basis or supplies and equipment. And if you have it, please provide a copy of your negotiated indirect cost rate agreement. Additionally, there are a set of standard forms that need to be included. That's what SF means. 424, 424A give financial overviews of the project. 424B provides assurances. If you are going to have a project that has other people's money that is accounted for in the grant and will run more than 3 years, you will need to provide a copy of the section B on the SF424A, which just gives you enough columns to report all the years. Then some additional forms related to lobbying and such you need to include as relevant. So that's what comes in your full proposal package. Those are the elements you must have, or we will not be able to review it past that initial administrative review. There is another piece that NOAA does not control that is very important, and we'll discuss it a little bit more in our tips for new applicants webinar. But you need to have a registered and an active registration in the federal government system for award management before you submit your full proposal. You will need to provide a unique entity identifier in that application, and for the course of any award you may receive, you have to maintain an active SAM registration. NOAA does not handle any aspect of the SAM process. We can't really do much to help you. That process can take more than a month to get an active account. Once you are confident you are going to apply, I encourage you to start that process, because again, it can take more than a month and it's not something we have any influence over here at NOAA. But assuming you are able to successfully submit and have all the required elements, we will use these criteria to evaluate your proposal. Again, these are what those expert reviewers will use. Overall alignment with priorities, how well you identified the needs, the quality of the approach, reasonableness of your costs, the workforce skills identified, your organizational capacity to carry out this work, the types of employer partnerships you have, the quality of those commitments, the number of job placements expected, the quality of your overall strategic partnerships, the co-investment and sustainability of the plan, and your diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and accessibility efforts. Once those we receive, each proposal will be reviewed by multiple reviewers. They'll rank those, and we will make our selections informed by their reviews. And we now have about 19 minutes for questions. I want to thank our Miss Crystal, our interpreter, and Miss Amara Davis, who is running the technical side and will be relaying your questions to me. Please use the Q&A feature of the webinar to type them in. This is so we can get a transcript of the questions and our answers, which will be posted. Ms. Crystal has a hard stop at 4 o'clock, so we will be ending then. At this point, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. Amara.
Our first question is from Janani, and it's, how do some of these program priorities extend to applications under the program design track? For example, recruiting and placing workers.
That is a very good question. I will scroll back to those slides so that I don't get them wrong. So if you are only doing phase one, the program design phase, there is an element, this is slide 15, okay. Hopefully nobody gets motion sick. During the program design phase, you are still going to be looking for employer commitments to hire. We envision that this might be the sort of thing where you have an employer or a group of employers who are willing to fund the implementation, i.e. the actual training, but for whatever reason, you don't have the resources to design the program itself. And so you would be able to say, we need 500K to design this program. We have employer commitments to, or we have philanthropic support or other elements that will allow us to fund the implementation. And we expect from this design to be able to place workers going forward. So these do exist on that continuum, and you would need to show that the program you're designing will lead to placements, even if you're only asking for the smaller amount. I hope that clarifies it sufficiently. If not, please revisit it. Okay, next, Amara.
All right, next question says, please clarify the eligibility of applicants focused on inland areas within coastal states, territories, or tribal nations, Also clarify whether or not it's acceptable to propose to do work that isn't explicitly set in marine settings.
I will address the second one first. The work is anywhere within coastal states, tribes, or territories, so it does not have to be marine. Um, uh, to be clearer, if you are any of an eligible applicant type located within an eligible geography, which is anywhere within a coastal state, tribe, or territory, including the Great Lakes. If you are in any of those geographies, not just a coastal zone area, you are eligible to apply. You must be one of these eligible organization types. If that is still unclear, please let me know. Next.
All right. Can you provide examples of how an inland city in a coastal state could address the Ocean Climate Action Plan must-have?
Well, I think the most foundational piece is that you are even inland communities are connected to the ocean directly or indirectly. And so you can take steps to improve the resiliency of rivers, lakes, streams, potentially address agricultural erosion and runoff. All of these would be relevant to addressing some elements of the Ocean Climate Action Plan. And I would encourage folks to think expansively about how those inland communities can support, work in inland communities can support these elements. But it's important to recognize that all these systems are interconnected.
Thank you. Next up, we have, will you share the letters of intent with applicants in the same geographic area so that we can consider collaborating?
At this time, it is not our intent to do that.
All right. Is a coalition of local governments, regional partnership, an eligible applicant for this grant?
Yes.
Perfect. Will there
With
be
the
any,
usual caveats.
will there be any weeding outs through letter of intent?
No. Letters of intent are intended strictly to allow us to gauge interest and select an appropriate reviewer pool.
All right. Can you expand on the concept regarding identifying sectors and how they connect to climate resilience? Do you have examples of that?
There are examples in the funding opportunity, and there will be a broader discussion of this tomorrow. However, my brain just completely lost its train of thought. Could you repeat the question? Examples of sectors and how they relate to climate resilience, correct?
Yes. Can you expand on the concept regarding identifying sectors and how they connect to climate resilience?
Yeah, so for example, some sectors are perhaps obvious. It's obvious how they relate to climate resilience. For example, we might think of coastal engineers and construction. Well, really, engineers and construction groups, right? They build things, they modify the landscape, and how they build and modify has a direct impact on the resilience of communities to climate. Um, However, other sectors that may have slightly less obvious connections, but still profound, would be things like um, the healthcare sector. And uh, a particular example that we've thought around is the impacts of heat on health, and what increasingly severe heat waves in communities mean, and how that impacts the resilience of the whole community, and in particular vulnerable segments therein. Others might be more or less of us obvious. Again, agriculture is a key contributor to our resilience in terms of food production, and also land use and land erosion. Similarly, you might see things like fisheries and aquaculture as having resilience implications driven by climate uh, for the communities where those industries are based. So um, Noah thinks about resilience pretty broadly, and I will leave a more detailed discussion to my colleague, Ned, who's presenting tomorrow. But I think broadly about how your workforce promotes the resilience of your community to climate threats.
All right, next we have, do we need a SAM or UEI for the letter of intent?
You do not.
And just as a note, for folks who have asked, we will be sharing a copy of the presentation as well as this recording so that folks can go back and watch, or if they were unable to attend, they can watch and access those materials. And all of the PDF is completely linked. So things that we've mentioned are linked in there for your ease of access. The next question is, can this funding be used as AmeriCorps match?
I I don't believe so, but I will need to get back to you with that definitively. If you can make sure that Amara has your contact information, we'll reach out, because I don't know the answer to that definitively.
All right, what is the distinction between employer partnerships and strategic partnerships?
I would say that employer partnerships, and again, my colleague Frank Niepold will be giving a webinar on the structure of these partnerships and how that works. Strategic partnerships are people who are not hiring your trainees. The employer partnerships are people who are potentially going to hire your trainees. The Leveraging Partnerships webinar is on July 21st, and we can discuss that more. But fundamentally, your strategic partners are all the folks you need to be successful in training and placing people with the employers who have committed to hire them. So that's why we make that distinction. Uh, your strategic partners are not necessarily the ones who are doing the hiring.
All right. Is actual job placement required for program design projects or simply a plan for job placement?
So the overall goal of this is to place people in jobs. So if you're putting forward a program design project, you need to have a clear path with commitments for hiring. If the you need to have a clear path for hiring. So no, if you're designing it, obviously you're not implementing it and you're not going to be placing people, but you need to have the commitments lined up where people could be placed once they go through an implemented training.
All right, can you review the timeline again? Application approval, project begins, work is placed, etc.
Yeah, I can do that if I know where my timeline slide is. So the letters of intent are due November 30th. The applications, the full proposals are due February 13th. There will be a review process. We expect, knocking on wood, hoping that everything goes well, that projects will be able to start by August 1st of 2024. And we are waiting heavily. The projects are expected to run 24 to 48 months with a priority given to projects that can place workers starting within 12 to 24 months. So there is an advantage to being able to place workers in good jobs, at least an initial cohort early. Yeah.
Okay. So I received notification that grants.gov is moving to a new system, GEMS, ERA/DOC. Will that impact this?
That notification is related to the Department of Commerce's internal grant system, which is currently Grants Online. It is moving to GEMS. Grants.gov will remain unchanged, and applications need to go through grants.gov. The transition will impact folks who are funded. You'll need to have accounts with GEMS, but that process will be the transition should be fairly well done by the time the applications come in, but that does not impact your ability to apply because you are applying through grants.gov.
All right.
I know it's confusing because everything's got grants in the name. Would be really helpful if we were more creative in our naming schemes. Sorry.
So we have some international partners who need workers for coastal restoration. Should we include those employers if they don't yet have a presence in the US?
The priority is for jobs for projects that will place workers in the communities they are from the communities the jobs are in. So if they do not yet have a presence in the United States, I would struggle to see how that meets that priority. You could write a really good proposal and persuade us, but I don't think that would address that priority.
Does the employer have to be from the private sectors or can it be from governments, etc.?
It can be from anyone who's willing to pay uh, and address those good job principles. So public and private sector are appropriate.
What are some examples of nonprofit certifications that might be relevant?
In the funding opportunity, there are specific ones. They are generally it's certifications related to your nonprofit status. And I want to pull up the specific piece so that I don't misspeak. these would be things like your organization's articles of incorporation or bylaws, or a current certificate of good standing, um, are the elements.
Are school districts eligible to apply?
Um, they fall under local governments generally, so I would say yes.
Can you give examples of climate resilience jobs?
Yeah, I provided some a few minutes ago, but these are jobs that enhance climate resilience. So it could be everything from an individual working with, high end would be architects or civil engineers. It could be landscapers, uh, and who are working with natural infrastructure. It could be health workers who are addressing climate uh, triggered health issues. It could be folks working in finance who need to understand the risks of investments that relate, the climate risks of investments they are considering making. Uh, there is a great deal of breadth for jobs that enhance climate resilience. And my colleague Ned Gardner will be presenting on this more tomorrow.
In regards to working with diverse participants, is there an area of diversity where you're focusing specifically?
No. Uh, I would say that the administration through Justice 40 is particularly interested in climate and economic justice scenarios through the climate economic justice screening tool. But we at NOAA take a holistic view of diversity, recognizing that there are a range of communities and individuals who would be differentially impacted by climate and by workforce um, development efforts. We've tried to, in the funding opportunity, to give a list of examples, but uh, we are reasonably certain that we can't capture everything. And so if there is a group that would like to make a specific case for their inclusion and why that is important, we would welcome that.
Very related to the last question, but is there a focus here also on addressing poverty, equity, and environmental justice in developing this workforce? I represent the state of Mississippi, and this would be an incredible opportunity to address additional socioeconomic issues, but is that a big focus for this call also?
I hope that we've made clear through the webinar that this is a big focus. This is central to our efforts here, um, because communities, to be resilient, you need to have the capacity to address that, and poverty and other elements um, that were listed in that question can reduce your resilience. So hopefully we are able to address those, and we certainly welcome proposals that look at that.
How can the government assist the lower income owner um, to benefit as taxpayer and with deductions from tax law that's affecting small businesses?
Woof. That's a really great question, and unfortunately, it's not one that I am really able to answer. That's the sort of question that um, probably need to address to the IRS or your local tax professional. Unfortunately, we do not give tax advice. Um, so I wish I could provide more insights, but it's, that's where we are.
How do you define a climate service practitioner?
Yeah, so we have a section in the funding opportunity that talks about it, but climate service practitioners are, again, to make sure I get the, my colleague Ned Gardner will be talking about this in more detail as well tomorrow. I'm sure he's appreciating me uh, um, providing that. So climate service practitioners have a range of experiences around climate. They are trained to evaluate climate risk and develop strategies responsive to that risk, and can help identify needed skills. So they are often transdisciplinary individuals that are able to leverage a range of skills to translate climate science into practical applications.
Can we show other federal funds as match?
Generally, match, well, so there is no required match. If there were, federal funding is not eligible for the most part to serve as match. However, you can show leverage of other resources. And so as written, you can demonstrate that as funds you are leveraging for the work, but it is not eligible to serve as formal match. But formal match is not required.
Alrighty. What kind of evidence should be provided to present job placements expected, which is one of the application evaluation criteria?
So you ideally would be able to provide expected number of participants per cohort. So you might say we're going to be able over the course of 4 years to have 5 cohorts, each of 100 100 workers, and we have employer commitments for 500 positions. That's the sort of thing we would be looking to see.
Under the program parameters, would an application representing a cluster of coastal states in a single geographic region be considered?
Yes.
Will there be opportunities for applicants in similar sectors, yet differing geographic regions, to be offered the opportunity to collaborate in the formulation of training materials, sharing resources, etc.?
Yes. One, there certainly we will not prevent you from reaching out to colleagues across geographies, and sectoral partnerships that span multiple geographies are certainly eligible. Additionally, selected applicants will be asked to participate in regular recipient meetings where they are able to collaborate with other funded applicants.
Can you only receive funding for one or the other priority?
No, you can fund, you could propose something that has program design and implementation.
The original announcement mentioned about $60 million total, and today you said 50 million. Has that changed, or can you verify the total allocation for the Climate Ready Workforce grants?
There will be $50 million provided through this competitive funding opportunity. The overall Climate Ready Workforce program at NOAA includes an additional 10 million of technical assistance, knowledge sharing platform support, and so forth. So there is that 10 million is being split between Climate Program Office, Office for Coastal Management, and Sea Grant to provide assistance to applicants and recipients to make sure that these projects have the best chance of success.
Is there a percentage that the employer must hire after the training is done?
Ideally, that percentage is 100, that you would have positions for everyone who successfully completes the training.
How does the requirement that projects be employer-led intersect with the eligibility categories that are quite broad and the references to a backbone organization?
So ideally, so the eligible applicants are who are able to submit the application. They represent, as the backbone of the partnership, as it were, they represent groups that have the ability to convene employers and other partners. By employer-led, we mean it's really employer needs driven. So you're looking for what jobs that exist or will exist, because some climate resilience jobs may not exist yet. We may need to, you may be designing something to come up with a new type of job that none of us have thought of, but that an employer says, I definitely need this, and will hire them. So it's led by who, what needs employers have, but the organization that is applying and managing is not necessarily the employer. That's that backbone organization that fits one of those eligible types.
Can an economic development nonprofit 501c6 qualify for funding?
Nonprofit organizations are eligible.
Are there requirements on the employer, partners, and local governments to be in the same geographic area?
It is a priority that jobs, make sure, again, I want to get that language exactly right. They place workers in jobs within appropriate geographies with a focus on training workers from the community where the jobs are located. So I guess the answer to that is maybe. I think I would need more details to provide an effective answer.
Okay. I'm going to read this just as it is because I want to make sure I'm getting all of the context. So you say you can take steps to improve rivers, streams, and other connections to the ocean for inland communities. Do you mean take steps to train people to be employed and do the work after the fact? Or is this funding opportunity actually funding these types of habitat restoration and enhancement projects?
My apologies. Yes, it is to train workers to carry out the work. If you would like to find funding for doing that work, there is the Climate Resilience Regional Challenges run by our colleagues at the National Ocean Service Office for Coastal Management. But no, this is for workers to carry out that work.
If the main applicant is a minority-serving higher education institution and wishes to partner with a local tribe that isn't federally recognized, will such a partnership still be viewed as beneficial for improving access and equity?
Yes.
Do the good jobs need to be new jobs, or can they be enhancements to existing jobs to incorporate climate-related skills in various functions?
They need to be new. You can train and recruit from within, but they need to be new positions. It doesn't reflect, it shouldn't reflect an accretion of duties. It should be a new position, though you could certainly retrain workers from within your existing workforce to include the climate resilience components. But we wouldn't want to say, Joshua, you now also have climate resilience on top of all your other requirements. It needs to be a new position.
Can an eligible applicant submit multiple applications?
There is no limit on the number of applications that we have imposed.
While match isn't required for this opportunity, you mentioned that leveraged funds would make a proposal more competitive. Where is this being considered in the application evaluation? The co-investment and sustainability section?
Yes.
Can you please review the types of jobs that are applicable for workforce training?
I am not sure that we gave a definitive list that would need to be reviewed. It is jobs that incorporate certain skills that are climate resilient, climate informed skills. And these are the relevant skills those jobs would have. So this could be any job that applies one or more of these could be eligible.
Is a for-profit, is a for-profit corporation with a public benefit with an explicitly defined and measurable climate resiliency positive externality eligible for this grant? I'm going to read it again.
Yep.
Is a for-profit corporation with a public benefit with an explicitly defined and measurable climate resiliency positive externality eligible for this grant?
The eligibility criteria for applicant type were set by the Inflation Reduction Act statute that these funds are under, and for-profit organizations of any type are not on that list. We would encourage such an organization to identify a partner that is eligible. But that was set for us. Sounds like a really cool group, and I'd love to learn more. But the eligibility applicant type, I'm jumping. Are as follows, and these were given directly to us in statute. So that's who's eligible.
How do we include employers from for-profit and public benefit companies in the proposal? For example, can they be unfunded collaborators if they are not eligible to apply?
So there's only going to be a single applicant that's from one of these types. They can't, for-profit companies and so forth can be unfunded or funded collaborators. If they are unfunded and donating time, that could count, or other materials, that could count as leverage support. They should be included wherever it makes sense. And if they are providing support, we encourage that to be documented through letters of support and such.
Can any state agency apply, or does it need to be an initiative from the governor's office?
We do not define that. I imagine that would be contingent on how your state government is structured. But certainly we won't turn down an application from somewhere. Whether you're allowed to do it is up to you.
What is the maximum award possible for a single project?
We envision awards being at most $10 million.
Does the funding have any specific eligibility criteria that training participants must meet, for example, minimum age?
I don't believe there is any criteria there.
How would an organization or nonprofit be required to utilize the money after being awarded?
It would need to, the funds would need to be used in accordance with the budget proposed. They're not allowed to build things, to build buildings. No construction is allowed. There is allowance for other forms of infrastructure that might be necessary, such as IT or training resources. But you would need to use the funds in the manner you propose to use them. And NOAA would work with selected recipients to ensure that all proposed usage of funds were consistent with federal laws and policies for financial assistance.
You may have already answered this, but can states submit multiple applications?
Yes.
The focus on current employers' needs seems to limit consideration of emerging food tech, innovation, entrepreneurship skills, and job development. That's a comment if you have a response.
Yeah. So it's that is a good point. The focus is really on employer needs, or needs that employers are willing to hire people for within the time period of the award. So if there is a current or emerging innovative industry that is breaking new ground, and they are willing to hire people and they have clear needs, that certainly is eligible for this work. The important part is that we don't want to be training people for something that might exist someday. We would want them to be being trained for something that will allow them to meet those good job principles when they finish the training. And so certainly if you've got an incubator or an ocean focused climate accelerator funding, which is another sister competition, you could use, you could propose to use funds from this to support an emerging industry, but you would need to have a clear commitment to hire.
Is it appropriate to apply if you already run a program with an emphasis on DEI and climate resilience, or are you only seeking the development of new programs?
We are interested in implement both program design, which would of course be for new programs, or program implementation, which could include existing programs or new programs. So certainly if you have a workforce development that is meeting the criteria of this, you could apply to expand it through program implementation.
Is there any preference toward jobs that require less extensive skills or education versus jobs that will require advanced education or degrees?
We have as a priority placing disadvantaged, supporting training that will support disadvantaged or underserved or otherwise vulnerable communities. Uh, many of those would, many of the jobs that would be most immediately helpful. Well, many of the people in those communities may not have advanced education. However, and so there may be more or less benefit to them, but there is no explicit preference for uh, higher or lower education jobs in this competition. We want good quality jobs, and we want jobs that people can be placed in a timely fashion.
All funded projects will be employer-led. Could that include a trade organization that represents a group of employers, say Builders Association?
Please repeat that. I think I know the answer, but I missed a nuance.
No worries. All funded projects will be employer-led. Could that include a trade organization that represents a group of employers, say a Builders Association?
Yes.
Related to the climate service practitioners question, can practitioners be contractors to the lead applicant?
Yes.
Can you define or give some examples of what could be considered infrastructure?
In what? I would need more context to answer that. If we're talking about infrastructure that are eligible for funds to be spent on, it would be things like training infrastructure, computers, uh, classroom materials like desks and things like that, but not buildings. If we're talking about jobs that support a climate resilient infrastructure, then we're talking about roads and bridges and all that good stuff. So I may need more clarity. And if I didn't get it in one of those two examples, please feel free to send an email and I'll clarify.
Is this a one-time grant or will it be available for future application cycles?
The Inflation Reduction Act funds were a one-time appropriation.
What is the connection to EDA with this project?
We have shamelessly stolen from their incredibly good efforts on the Good Jobs Challenge. Well, for those who participated in that, and I should have had a slide in the beginning and I forgot to do it, so my apologies. This is based very heavily on EDA's Good Jobs Challenge. We're using much of the language and design because that was so successful and to tap into the community that has already been established through that.
Can funding be used as salary to support those who are hired after they successfully complete training?
No, no, I
Can,
don't think so. No.
just for clarity, the answer is no.
The answer is no. The employer who is hiring them should be paying their salary.
Okay. Can funding be used to pay for housing for training program participants?
I will put that as a qualified yes, depending on the exact context. That could be considered a wraparound service, but would likely require some robust justification. For example, you're training them in a location where they don't have access to housing.
If you can pursue both design and implementation priorities, should you include both in the same proposal or
Correct.
should you apply twice?
You should apply once with both elements in the proposal.
If there are two potential grants from the same large higher education institution, should they combine into one application or submit two separate applications? Would one impede the opportunities for the other?
Depends on how good they both are. They should combine them if they make sense to be combined. Projects are evaluated independently against the evaluation criteria. However, there are a series of selection factors that we will use sort of after the evaluations are complete when we determine where the funds will go. And geography is one of those. However, we have, and those are standard to NOAA. However, we have consistently awarded projects under other competitions to applicants at the same university or other organization if they're of high enough quality. So it's really whether they combining them makes sense and the overall quality of the application.
Is there a minimum length of time for employment commitment? For example, would a summer job program be eligible?
We did not define that explicitly in the funding opportunity. However, we will be measuring the success of the program based on number of applicants placed or still in their placements after a year and I believe after 5 years. So we are looking for longer term placement commitments.
How long does the employer need to commit to maintain the hire slash new role? And how would that be impacted by an employee decision to leave for a different job? So I know that you mentioned that we're looking for longer term employment, but in the case that an employee decided to leave for a different job, how would that impact the employer?
I mean, we do not control other people's, we don't control workers' decisions. It's really, we don't want these positions to be ephemeral. So, people move, but as long as the position persists, I think that would be fine. And that's not something you would put in your proposal anyway.
Can funds be used for tuition?
They can be used to support trainee participation, so that might include tuition.
We plan to propose a training program at our university specifically targeting an underserved community and help them to get jobs related to climate change. Does it fit this program?
Potentially. I would need more details to be Sure, but at the highest level, it sounds reasonable. As long as you have employer commitments.
All right, that was our final question. I'll give it 2 more minutes to see if anyone has anything that's burning. Thank you all for sticking with us. I know we're quite a bit over time, but I'll just give it a couple of minutes and we'll see if anything else comes through. And just for as a reminder, these slides as well as the recording are going to be posted as soon as we can get them up on the CRW website, which is cgrant.noaa.gov/CRW. And we did get one last question. Just for reiteration, any state agency can apply, or does it need to be an initiative from the governor's office?
From NOAA's perspective, any state agency is eligible. If your governor or agency has other rules, you need to be bound by those. But from our perspective, it can come from anywhere.
And what are the basic requirements to apply?
They are listed in the funding opportunity, but you must be in an eligible geography and you must be an eligible type. And then there are a whole slew of things that I'm not going to reiterate, but that are on the slides and in the funding opportunity that are the requirements for the application.
Can people be incumbent workers but be trained up in a specialized role within the same workforce?
Yes, however, they need to get a new job out of it. So it can't be you take bureaucrat Joshua Brown and train him up and put a gold star after his name that says he's climate ready and he keeps doing what he's doing. It needs to be a new job, but you can train workers from your incumbent workforce for new roles that are climate ready.
What are the ramifications of employer agreements that are not fulfilled? You have employers who then do not hire all they committed to.
Yeah, that's a tough spot. And the ramifications are going to be defined by whatever the nature of the agreements you made and the commitments they made with you. Some, you know, there's going to be some variability and I imagine there will need to be some flexibility, but ideally you're going to partner with folks who are able to honor their commitments, barring extrinsic factors. You know, if the company goes out of business, they obviously can't hire more people, but we encourage you to make sure you're partnering with folks who are reliable.
Can the main applicant entity also be the training entity?
Yes, as long as they meet one of those type criteria. So yes.
How is this program defining worker? Could workers be teachers and/or next generation workers?
A worker is a person who has a role that employs one of those skills. So they could be teachers. I'm not familiar with the term next generation worker, so I will look that up and in the written transcript provide a better answer on that. But in theory, a worker is somebody who fills a role that employs these skills.
Will NOAA be having office hours and/or is there an email to consult with NOAA on project ideas and eligibility for this program?
You can email questions to sg.grants@noaa.gov. We do not currently have office hours set, but if you email there, we will work to respond either an email or set up a call to talk.
Sorry, I realized that I was typing and my mic was on. Can the project be conducted in two locations, i.e. West Coast or East Coast?
Absolutely. You would need to, in that sort of identification of region and why you're doing it, make clear why you're working, in multi-coastal, but it is absolutely reasonable for a project to occur at large scale.
Is it essential to have a PI level professional, for example, an ex-PhD candidate in climate change or adjacent field on the proposal?
You need to have a climate resilience practitioner on the proposal to help make sure the skills are working with client knowledge. And I'll point to the webinar that my colleague Frank Niepold will be giving tomorrow to talk about those partnerships in more detail. A climate resilience practitioner is going to have a set of skills. They don't have to be a PhD. They need to be knowledgeable and experienced in translating climate information to action. So however you need to, so however that works for your team.
I am from Maryland and was interested if a proposal targeting the Chesapeake Bay would also be applicable.
Yes.
Will size of the applying state or community be considered when reviewing applications? We are a small state and many of our most vulnerable communities are small and rural. We would prefer to focus on job quality and security over quantity.
The job quantity range is a target. You have the ability to justify why the need and the needs and targets are appropriate for your proposal and the funding amount you are requesting.
Can a state agency apply or must it come on behalf of the whole state? We are a department under our state's Natural Resources Agency. Would the state Natural Resources Agency need to be the applicant?
From NOAA's perspective, you can apply. The question is really whether your state has limitations on your ability to apply independently of the statewide agency.
Can a training, oh, I think we answered this already, but just in case, can a training entity also be the hiring entity?
We did not answer this one on this webinar. Yes, probably. The devil will be in the details, but I can imagine at least a few scenarios where that is reasonable. So um, that would benefit from some more specific conversation. But in general, yes.
Do the workers need to be hired within the timeline of the grant for a position that is created, although not filled, be accessible?
Yeah, so that if you're doing an a project implementation, that phase 2, you would need to be placing workers again within 12 to 48 months, with preference for initial placements within 12 months. If you're doing a project design or a program design, that phase 1, they would not necessarily have to be placed because you're just designing things, but you would still need those employer commitments.
As a follow-up, would those employer commitments fall under the same timeline for the project implementation folks?
Yes.
We are a Great Lakes state, but our service region does not include the lake region. How does that impact eligibility?
If you are a Great Lakes state, your whole state is eligible. If you are a coastal state or a coastal territory or a Great Lakes state, your whole state's eligible. Yeah.
What is the calculation on the job opportunities versus number of hiring entities in a region? And will the hiring entities have to guarantee funding to hire folks, or is forecasting appropriate?
I will need to look into the first part of that question. We don't have a specific calculation. On the second part, as to whether they guarantee funding or forecasting, obviously guarantee funding would be preferable, but forecasting is also reasonable. Though yeah, forecasting is also reasonable.
All right, folks, we have about 8 minutes left if you have any last burning questions. And as a reminder, the webinar recording, as well as a PDF of the presentation, a transcript of the webinar recording, and once we are done compiling all of the questions, a question and answer document will be made available on our website. It's listed on the slide, but I'll go ahead and read it out. That's cgrant.noaa.gov/CRW. All right, folks, I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you so much for attending the webinar, and we'll go ahead and end.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ms. Crystal.
You're welcome. No problem. Have a good day.
You too.